Hey Facebook, as Facebook is building my audience, tonight we're going to talk about how heir property can hurt families. I'm seeing a lot of families being torn up by heir property. So that's the reason that I'm doing this video. Wait till a couple more people get on and then we'll start. If you have any questions in between now and then, please do post your questions. All right. The first thing about why I wanted to do this video is because we've been working with a lot of properties where the person has passed away. That becomes heir property. That means that it could be children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that are all involved in a property. And a lot of times they say you don't know people until money is involved. Well, a lot of times we're seeing where heir property is actually destroying families. Some people don't understand. They think that because they live in the property that they have more rights than the people that may live out of town, that don't have access to the property. Just because you have access to the property does not give you more rights than the absent owner. They can come in and force you to sell the property through a court order. Even if you've been living there for 20, 30 years, they don't care. The court can come and make you get out, make them sell the property, and give you your portion. A lot of people think that because they are heir to grandma's house, that they have equal ownership. That is not the truth. For example, if grandma had 4 children, then that means that they each own 25%. Well, if you are one of grandma's grandchildren and your mother died, you only get a portion of your mother's 25%. You do not get half ownership or equal ownership if you have siblings. Then that means that if it's you and another sibling, now you only owe 12.5% of the property. You do not own as much as your aunt or your uncle who was an actual child to your grandmother. Also, a lot of people don't understand that the mortgage still has to be paid if there's a mortgage on the property. Somebody has to be responsible for that mortgage payment. Well, guess what? One family member can get stuck with the entire mortgage bill. For example, if there are 3 children, 2 of the children cannot afford to help pay the mortgage, you may be stuck paying the entire mortgage. Well, just because you've been making the mortgage payments does not mean that you have the most seniority or the most rights to the property. Even though those people are not helping pay, then guess what? They still have as much rights to the property as you do. I've got a question here where it says, if the home is in a will to only one child, then what? Then you will have to seek legal advice on that, because it depends, because sometimes people are coming up with wills and different things that are after that. Also, if, say, you are the only child and your mother had a husband, well, guess what? If that husband's name is on the deed, depending on how that deed was written, if it was joint owners in common or rights of survivorship, then that means that if you are the only child and your mom and dad's name is on the property, but they have it deeded for survivorship, guess what? The property automatically reverts to your father with full ownership, and that does not give you your mother's portion. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Also, people think that this is the best way to own property. It's actually not, because when you're dealing with 3, 4, 5, 6 different people with different opinions about the way things should be handled, it becomes a big mess. And then if somebody wants to get out of the property and nobody's willing to buy them out, and then they go to the court and force you to sell a property that has been in your family for generations and generations, that could happen as well. So sometimes it's not better to own property with other people, because then you've got a difference of opinion. People have different objectives as to what they want to do with the property, how they want to deal with the property. Then some people think because if I pay the property taxes that I am entitled to the property. Guess what? You just paying the taxes to keep it from being auctioned off for somebody else to take your property for taxes. That does not give you any more ownership than the other heirs. I've seen where somebody was paying the taxes for 6 years. Guess what? They were out of that money until it was a forced sale. When it was a forced sale, then they were able to get reimbursed for the things that they had spent money on. And it came out of the net proceeds of all people. But that necessarily doesn't happen, and that can eat up the equity while people are fighting over property. Then it still has to be maintained, because the government doesn't care if you don't pay the taxes. They're going to seize it for the taxes. So a lot of times people think that they have certain rights. It's about who's on that deed and who is actually an heir. Now, if it was a foster parent and they died, if you were not legally adopted by those people, and then you're not a blood relative, or it wasn't your spouse, then a lot of times you may not be entitled as an heir. Also, you want to make sure that you don't eat up your equity or send the property into foreclosure because nobody is willing to pay the taxes, or people are not willing to pay the mortgage, and then you all lose out on the equity. We've seen where there's been only $100,000 owed. Nobody wants to pay the mortgage payment. Now it's getting behind. Now the bank is threatening to foreclose, and the house is worth $200,000, but you just got $50,000 in fees. So you just wasted $50,000 with the equity, fighting and fussing and not getting anywhere. So it's better to come to a common ground, have a will or have a trust, so that people will know how things are supposed to be executed. Also, just to let you know that sometimes owning property with other people is not the very best thing in the world to happen.